I think from a tennis perspective, my kind of worst fears were realized, I suppose, in that you had a clearly unfit Nick Kyrgios giving what seemed like a pretty half-hearted effort at times, beating the world number one women's player Arina Sabalenka despite court adjustments in her favour, and I kind of just come out of that thinking, well, sure, like of course that was always the most likely outcome. Great job lifting up women's tennis Arina Sabalenka by taking part in this, as she kept saying would happen all along. And look, I'm not going to think any worse of women's tennis because of this, but you bet some people will. An event that totally sort of did not need to happen will fuel the fire of misogyny that we know is out there. I think what I was most surprised by was how sort of bland and meh and really like lacking in show and style this was. In fact, the production of it was pretty poor and cheap seeming. Obviously, Sabalenka and Kyrgios and the people putting on this event the whole time were sort of distancing themselves from the seriousness of it. They were hearing the criticism and they were saying, look, it's not that deep. It's going to be entertaining. That was kind of their counter argument. And look, maybe some people found it entertaining. I just don't really think it even was that. It seemed to fall really, really flat to me.
Yeah, I think broadly it needed to have stakes or vibes, and it ended up with neither really. Obviously, 1973 there were huge stakes. It really meant something, and those stakes don't exist now, thankfully. The only way it would have been interesting in that sense was if there was needle, if they really didn't like one another for whatever reason, and I don't mean that Kyrgios Sabalenka necessarily, but whoever was facing each other, or you kind of lean into the vibes of it and you really do make it a show. And at a bare minimum, like you said, I think if they had mic'd them up, that could have been quite fun. People will have their views on Nick Kyrgios, certainly, but he can be reasonably entertaining. He that could have been quite interesting seeing them, or mic'd up at change of ends, that sort of thing. But there
They might have
wasn't
been
really
able to
that.
explain why Karen Hashanov was there.
Exactly.